For as long as humans have existed, frightening stories have dominated our collective consciousness. With a large collection of folklore centered around our darkest fantasies and an innate connection to the fear of death, tales of monsters and nightmares have existed throughout history. The horror genre has ancient origins, with roots in folklore and religious traditions focusing on death, the afterlife, evil, and the demonic, embodied in people and creatures such as demons, witches, vampires, werewolves, and ghosts. With such a strong precedent in literature and oral history, it's no surprise that the first horror movie was quick to sink its teeth in as soon as the advent of cinema. Horror is a film genre that seeks to elicit fear or disgust in its audience for entertainment purposes. Horror films often explore dark subject matter and may deal with transgressive topics or themes. From origins in silent films and German Expressionism, horror became a codified genre after the release of Dracula in 1931. The horror film genre has a complex and often problematic relationship with gender, particularly in its portrayal and treatment of women. Historically, horror films have frequently positioned women as victims, with the final girl trope becoming a staple of slasher films. This trope typically features a lone female survivor who outlasts her peers and ultimately confronts the killer. While this character often displays resourcefulness and resilience, critics argue that her survival is contingent on her embodiment of traditional feminine virtues like chastity and sobriety. Horror films have also provided a platform for exploring female power and agency. Many films subvert expectations by presenting women as the source of horror, challenging traditional gender roles and societal expectations. This subversion can be empowering, allowing for the exploration of female rage, sexuality, and power in ways that other genres might shy away from. The concept of abjection, as theorized by Julia Kristeva, provides a useful lens for examining the intersection of horror and gender. Abjection refers to the human reaction of horror or disgust to a threatened breakdown in meaning. In horror films, this often manifests in bodily functions, corpses, or other elements that blur the boundaries of the body and self. In a similar vein, the notion of the monstrous feminine is a concept that explores how the female body and feminine attributes are often portrayed as sources of horror in film. This concept is closely tied to abjection, as the female body, particularly in its reproductive capacity, is often presented as a site of horror and revulsion. Welcome to my exploration of the rhetoric of horror in cinema, particularly focusing on the concept of abjection and its manifestation in the monstrous feminine. This video will delve into the complexities of horror films, examining how they challenge societal norms, gender roles, and our understanding of fear and disgust. So let's delve into the world of horror and uncover the powerful messages hidden within its darkness. Welcome to Creepshow with Crystal. Okay, folks, gather around because we're about to dive into the weird world of abjection. Fair warning, this might get messy, but I promise it's worth sticking around for. So what's the deal with abjection? Well, it's this concept that tackles all the stuff that makes our skin crawl or our stomachs turn. You know those moments when you're like, oh hell no, I want to jump out of your skin? That's abjection. Imagine this, you're walking down the sidewalk minding your own business when suddenly, squish, you've stepped in something nasty. Your gut reaction, that instant, ugh, gross, boom, abjection in the flesh. Or well, you know what I mean. Abjection isn't just about the physically revolting. Nope, it's a real-life mind bender that messes with our very sense of self. It's the stuff that makes us question what's normal and sends our brains into a tailspin. Take zombies, for instance. Why do the undead freak us out? Sure, they're corpses with a nasty habit of snacking on the living, but there's more to it. They're this uncanny in-between, not quite dead, but definitely not alive. They're category-defying nightmares, and that's abjection working its dark magic. Ever wondered why body horror flicks leave us feeling so unsettled? You know the ones where folks start sprouting extra limbs or their skin decides to take a vacation? That's abjection dialed up to 11, turning the familiar, our own meat suits, into something alien and terrifying. Abjection isn't just about wanting to hurl. It's weirdly captivating too. It's like a grisly car crash or a pimple popping video. You want to look away, but you can't quite get yourself to. It's repulsive yet oddly magnetic. And get this, some scholars argue that wrestling with abjection is key to figuring out who we are. By giving a hard pass to all this disturbing stuff, we're drawing a line in the sand. That's not me, so this must be me. In the broadest sense, abjection is defined as a lower downcast state or degradation. The abject, according to philosopher Julia Kristeva, refers to our reaction to a threatened breakdown in meaning caused by the loss of the distinction between subject and object or between self and other. Kristeva's theory of abjection in the book Powers of Horror, an essay on abjection, tries to explain what gives rise to horror and disgust in humans and why. Key aspects of the abject include marginality, wherein abject things are pushed to the margins and excluded from the mainstream, or existing outside societal norms. Pollution and contamination, often being linked with bodily fluids, decay, or other elements that are seen as dirty or impure, and fear and disgust, pointing to the idea that the abject provokes strong emotional feelings of horror, revulsion, and dread. Examples of abjects set forth by Kristeva include bodily fluids such as blood, vomit, pus, and other fluids that transgress boundaries of the body, decay and death representing the ultimate breakdown of self, and the maternal body with its capacity to give life and expel it. The primary example is the corpse, which traumatically reminds us of our own materiality. However, other items can elicit the same reaction. The open wound, shit, sewage, even particularly immoral crimes like that of Auschwitz. Kristeva gives an account of food loathing, which she describes as perhaps the most elementary and most archaic form of abjection. In the following quote, Kristeva explains in detail the sickening sensation of consuming rotten food. When the eyes see or the lips touch that skin on the surface of milk, harmless, thin as a sheet of cigarette paper, pitiful as a nail paring, I experience a gagging sensation, and still farther down, spasms in the stomach and belly, and all the organs shrivel up the body, provoke tears and bile, increase heartbeat, cause forehead and hands to perspire. Along with the sight clouding dizziness, nausea makes me balk at that milk cream, separates me from the mother and father who pro-offer it. I do not want to listen. I do not assimilate it, I expel it. But since the food is not an other for me, who am only in their desire, I expel myself. I spit myself out. I abject myself within the same motion through which I claim to establish myself. In this example, the potentially harmful entity, the rotten milk, is deemed as the other in which the body refuses to associate or assimilate with. Kristeva's conceptualization of abjection has been essential in creating a clear distinction between what is considered the self and what is seen as other. Abjection also influences societal rules and norms by determining what is acceptable and what must be rejected or excluded to maintain system and order. In the article titled Abjection, published in 2014 in Transgender Studies Quarterly, author Robert Phillips describes abjection as the process by which identificatory regimes exclude subjects that they render unintelligible or beyond classification, that serves to maintain or reinforce boundaries that are threatened. The horror genre is frequently conceptualized in terms of its effective impact on the audience. A prevalent element within the genre is the presence of monstrous entities. These creatures are characteristically portrayed as impure and contaminated, occupying liminal spaces between various physical, psychological, and ontological states. This inherent ambivalence contributes to their perceived deviance as they resist definitive categorization or definition. Consequently, these entities embody unpredictability and exist beyond the boundaries of the natural order, challenging established cognitive frameworks and eliciting responses of fear and unease in viewers. The monsters portrayed throughout horror either embody the abject in themselves, in the otherness of their bodies or actions, or project it onto others. Horror films, according to Pam Cook in The Cinema Book, are a kind of modern defilement rite in which all that threaten the rule of order and meaning, all that is the other, is separated out and subordinated to the paternal law. Next time you're squirming in your seat during a horror flick, or find yourself morbidly fascinated by something gnarly, remember, you're grappling with abjection. You're doing the mental work of defining your boundaries, your normal, your very self. And there you have it, abjection in all of its gory glory. It's messy, it's puzzling, and it's a crucial piece of the understanding ourselves and the world puzzle. Who knew something involving bodily fluids could be so profound, right? All right, let's dive into the wild world of the monstrous feminine. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. So picture this. You're watching a horror movie, and the big bad monster turns out to be a woman. But not just any woman. We're talking about a creature that's horrifying precisely because of her femininity. That's the monstrous feminine in a nutshell. Now, you might be thinking, wait, what's so scary about being female? Well, that's the million-dollar question. The concept of the monstrous feminine plays on historically deep-seated cultural fears and anxieties about women and their bodies. Think about it. We've got movies with terrifying mother figures like an Alien with those face huggers. Or how about those vengeful female ghosts in Asian horror movies? Remember The Ring? Yeah, Samara wasn't exactly your friendly neighborhood Casper. But it goes deeper than just having female monsters. The monstrous feminine taps into fears about things like pregnancy, childbirth, and menstruation. It's like the patriarchy in society took all these natural biological processes and went, yep, that's horror movie material right there. And let's not forget about the whole femme fatale thing. You know, this seductive woman who lures men to their doom? That's the monstrous feminine playing on the fears of female sexuality and power. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Some feminist scholars argue that the monstrous feminine isn't just about fear, it's also about power. These monstrous women often break social norms and expectations. They're not playing by the rules, and that's what makes them both terrifying and, in a way, kind of badass. Taking heavily from Kristeva's theory of abjection, Barbara Creed sets forth the concept of the monstrous feminine, referring to the portrayal of female characters in horror films as embodying monstrous traits and evoking fears in audiences. In her 1993 publication, The Monstrous Feminine, Film, Feminism, Psychoanalysis, Creed examined how female monsters are frequently depicted as monstrous for reasons related to their bodies, gender, and sexuality, and created a new term to analyze this phenomena. Creed states, "I adopted the phrase monstrous feminine because the term female monster implies a straightforward reverse of male monster." The monstrous feminine concept provides a theoretical framework for analyzing, challenging, confronting, upending, and reinventing the cultural mythology of womanhood, femininity, and gender in connection to monstrosity. Monstrous women dwell on the fringes of American pop culture, serving as precipices and liminal areas, unmanageable challenges to power structures and normative gender roles. The monstrous feminine staged and performed monstrosity as a gendered experience, creating a theater of fury, desire, mortality, and violence. The monstrous feminine has traditionally been pervasive, multidimensional, and unlocatable. But in current culture, it is most visible in horror films, performance art, music, and even social media. Creed further explains, "As with all other stereotypes of the feminine, from virgin to whore, she is defined in terms of her sexuality. The phrase monstrous feminine emphasizes the importance of gender in the construction of her monstrosity." The monstrous feminine can be seen in various horror tropes, such as the vengeful ghost, the witch, or the demonic mother. These figures often embody societal fears about female sexuality, motherhood, and power. Films like Carrie, The Exorcist, and Rosemary's Babies all explore aspects of the monstrous feminine, using female bodies and experiences as sources of horror, while simultaneously critiquing societal attitudes towards women. Creed proposes 7 possible faces of female monstrosity: archaic mother, monstrous womb, vampire, witch, possessed monster, deadly femme castress, and the castrating mother. Creed explains, "The horror film is populated by female monsters, many of which seem to have evolved from images that have haunted our dreams, myths, and artistic practices of our forebears many centuries ago. The female monster or monstrous feminine wears many faces: the amoral primeval mother, witch, woman as monstrous womb, woman as bleeding wound, woman as possessed body, the castrating mother, woman as beautiful but deadly killer, aged psychopath, the monstrous girl boy, woman as non-human animal, woman as life and death, and woman as the deadly femme castrice." Cultures within patriarchal civilizations possess mythology and folklore that portray feminine characteristics and anatomy as innately monstrous. Creed claims, utilizing Kristeva's concept of abjection, that the monsterization of women occurs as a result of women's near contact to the abject, particularly during menstruation, pregnancy, and childbirth. The female body is continuously challenging and destroying the boundaries established between dichotomies like inside out and living dead. Creed also expands on Freud's concept of castration anxieties and the myth of the vagina dentata, claiming that the masculine fear of the mother contributes to the creation of the monstrous feminine through castrating mother characters and terrifying womb and vagina-like environments and creatures. The monstrous feminine can be seen in many horror films, and Creed discusses them at length in her book. For example, Alien, released in 1979, where the depiction of the alien creature and the character of Ripley involved themes of the abject and the maternal. Another example is the original Carrie, directed by Brian De Palma. The film explores the horror of female puberty and the power of repressed female rage and power. Similarly, The Exorcist, released in 1973 and directed by William Friedkin, deals with the possession of Reagan by a demon involving bodily fluids, sexual difference, and the abject. More contemporary examples can be seen in films like Jennifer's Body, which portray a demonic female succubus, grotesque monsters embodying motherly traits like the Mother in Barbarian, destructive female werewolves like those in Werewolves Within, or the ethereal and all-powerful vampire Queen Akasha in Queen of the Damned. Next time you're watching a horror flick and the monster is a woman, ask yourself, what exactly is supposed to be scary here? Is it just that she's powerful and doesn't fit into a neat little box? You might find that the real horror isn't the monster on screen, but the societal attitude she represents. And that, folks, is the Monstrous-Feminine. It's not just about scares. It's a whole lens for looking at how society views women, their bodies, and their power. Pretty heavy stuff for your average slasher flick, huh? Picture this. A horror film where the ladies aren't just screaming bloody murder in little to no clothes. Mind-blowing, right? That's what feminism horror brings to the table. These films don't just flip the script. They toss it out the window and write a whole new playbook. In these spine tinglers, women aren't just running from the attacker. They're calling the shots, facing their demons, or sometimes even embracing their inner monster. It's like the genre got a much-needed adrenaline shot of girl power. These movies aren't just content with serving up scares. They're dishing out some serious food for thought. They're using bumps in the night to shine a spotlight on the real-life horrors women face every day. Sexism, societal pressure, bodily autonomy, nothing's off limits. Take Raw, for instance. It's not just about a cannibalistic take on a coming-of-age film. It's a gnarly deep dive into female desire and sisterhood. Or The Witch. Sure, there's a creepy goat, but it's really about religious oppression and female empowerment. These movies aren't just out to entertain. They're here to make us squirm in our seats for reasons beyond jump scares. They hold up a cracked mirror to society, showing us the monstrous side of our everyday world. It's like getting sucker punched by social commentary while you're busy hiding behind a cushion. And let's not forget the talent behind the camera. Feminist horror often puts women in the director's chair, serving up fresh perspectives that make your head spin faster than Linda Blair's in The Exorcist. In the past decade, there has been a shift in horror that is both female and feminist focused, with an increase in representation both on and off the screen, as well as feminist themes and perspectives. Contemporary filmmakers are paving a way for horror to reflect the issues and concerns facing women today through a genre heavily cemented in social and political commentary. Key trends of what is being called feminist new wave cinema includes female protagonists who are complex, multidimensional, strong, and resilient. There's also a notable increase in the number of female directors and writers bringing fresh perspectives and stories to the genre. Most recently, the genre is beginning to reflect a broader range of female experiences, including those of women of color, LGBTQ+ folks, and women from various socioeconomic backgrounds. In 1978, Marxist queer film critic Robin Wood made the convincing case that there is no better film genre than horror to express and contest the oppression of capitalistic patriarchy. Our culture, he argued, operates by forcing us to repress every thought, impulse, and emotion that goes against a standard of normalcy dictated by patriarchy. In the book, Women Make Horror, Filmmaking Feminism Genre, Pierce illuminates Robin Wood's model of film theorization and film practice that enables us to connect theory closely with the ways we actually think and feel and conduct our lives. In what she calls cinefeminism, Pierce advocates for an understanding of horror that engages women practitioners and resonates with an increased need for activism amidst our contemporary political climate. Pierce sets forth what she calls the Women Make Horror Manifesto, a list of principles designed to draw attention to and then deconstruct the natural and inevitable way women practitioners and/or horror films are analyzed, and in doing so, break open a much wider range of opportunities for future work on gender and genre. In her book, Femme Fatale's Feminism Film Theory, Psychoanalysis, author M.A. Doan states, contemporary filmmaking addresses itself to the activity of uncoding, decoding, and deconstructing the given images. It is a project of defamiliarization whose aim is not necessarily that of seeing the female body differently, but of exposing the habitual meanings and values attached to femininity as cultural constructs. In a follow-up to her seminal previous work, Robert Creed released Return of the Monstrous-Feminine, Feminist New Wave Cinema in 2022. Creed argues that feminist New Wave cinema portrays the monstrous feminine in revolt, and the male protagonist as the abject, violent other. She states, in what sense are men abject? Kristeva defines male abjection not in relation to his body, but specifically in relation to those whose actions are duplicitous and who highlight the fragility of the symbolic order. The shameless rapist is particularly abject. Man's abjection is tied to his intentions and deeds. Man can threaten society and reveal the fragility of the law through an excess of aggression, as in rape. Kristeva also associates other acts of aggression with the male subject who engages in traitorous, criminal, and murderous behavior, but those are of a special kind to be seen as abject. They must draw attention to the fragility of the law. Feminist New Wave films explore the different forms of male abjection discussed by Kristeva. The religious patriarchs of The Handmaid's Tale rob women of their identity. They lose their names, children, and past lives while pretending to be their savior. The deeply religious father of Thelma, who plans to murder his lesbian daughter, is a criminal with a good conscience. The male protagonist of Revenge, the Nightingale, and Promising Young Woman are shameless rapists. Feminist New Wave cinema depicts male abjection from a feminist point of view. It explores the corrosive power of the authoritarian and violent patriarchal order, its repression of the feminine, and the effect of this on the lives of women and other marginalized groups whose voices have been silenced. The goal of the female protagonist of female New Wave cinema is to speak again in her own voice in order to call out the abject male whose abjection is not liberating, but designed to keep an oppressive patriarchal order in place. Theorists such as Judith Butler, Tina Chanter, and Jane Wark have called for a rethinking of abjection as a force that has the power to create political agency and social change. Kristeva states that abjection can inspire revolt, leading to the formation of new ways of thinking and speaking. Kristeva states, in abjection, revolt is completely within being, within the being of language. Contrary to hysteria, which brings about, ignores, or seduces the symbolic but does not produce it, the subject of abjection is eminently productive of culture. Its symptom is the rejection and reconstruction of languages. Ultimately, Kristeva argues that the effort to embrace abject is perfectly suited to a journey into the world of the horrific. Feminist New Wave cinema speaks through the language of cinema to create a feminist imaginary. Feminist New Wave directors endow women with different forms of communication, many of which invoke the semiotic through sounds and touch, or adopt uncanny modes of communication such as magic, writing in fragments, and performance. Feminist New Wave directors have found ways to create a new female and feminist imaginary by focusing on women's voice, women's journey into abjection, female agency and desire, in newly fashioned intergeneric films such as the coming-of-age film that creates a feminine space in which directors can work. Elizabeth Cowie explores the nature of feminist horror in films that are bloody and raw. She emphasizes the importance of centering a woman and addressing us with her story, her desire, and the puzzle of her identity, thereby raising issues of feminist politics. Cowie's focus on her desire and the puzzle of her identity raises an important issue for feminist theory, that is, the need always to keep open questions of difference and difficulty. In general, there is a nuance added to horror and the betrayal of female characters when a feminist New Wave cinema stance is taken. It utilizes the powerful force of female and inclusive creators to create narratives that are impactful and illustrative of real-world concerns and problems facing marginalized communities, especially those of women. Perhaps one of the most important facets to this way of thought is through the shift from male to female gaze. So let's talk about the feminist gaze for a second. It's not just flipping the male gaze on its head or some detached way of looking at things. Nah, it's way more than that. Imagine this. You're watching a film and suddenly you feel like you're right there with the main character. You get her, you know? You're feeling what she's feeling, experiencing her world. That's the feminist gaze in action. It's all about empathy and understanding. It's like the camera is saying, hey, step into her shoes for a moment. You start to notice the little things, her quiet moments, her desires, those intimate scenes that aren't just there for show. This gaze doesn't just see, it feels. It's tuned into the character's everyday life, her emotion, her relationships. It's not just about what she looks like, but who she is as a whole person. When you're watching through this lens, something weird happens. You start to internalize what you're seeing. It's not just a visual thing anymore. Your whole body gets involved. You might find yourself tensing up when she's stressed or smiling when she has a moment of self-discovery. So yeah, the feminist gaze, it's not just about looking, it's about connecting, understanding, and feeling. It's a whole new way of experiencing stories on screen. Alright folks, we've journeyed through the dark and twisted world of horror, peering into the abyss of abjection and the monstrous-feminine. We've seen how horror films have historically played with gender, sometimes reinforcing stereotypes, but often subverting them in the most unexpected ways. We've explored how the concept of abjection, with its mix of revulsion and fascination, can help us understand our own boundaries and sense of self. And we've delved into the monstrous feminine, uncovering the deep-seated fears and anxieties about women and their bodies that have been woven into our cultural tapestry. In the past decade, we've seen a shift in horror that's both female and feminist focus. These films aren't just about serving up scares. They're about empowerment, about women taking control of their stories and their destinies. They're about using the genre to address real-world issues and to challenge the status quo. Feminist horror isn't just about scaring us. It's about shining a light on the real horrors we face every day. It's about showing us the monstrous side of our everyday world, the oppression, the sexism, and the societal pressures that weigh us down. Feminist horror isn't just breathing new life into the genre. It's performing a full-on resurrection. It's proving that horror can be smart, subversive, and still scare the pants off of us. Abjection, the monstrous feminine, and feminist new wave cinema really have shaken up the horror genre. These concepts have given us some seriously creepy and thought-provoking films that challenge our ideas about gender, bodies, and what really freak us out. Next time you're watching a horror flick, keep an eye out for how it plays with these themes. You might be surprised at the depth hiding behind all those jump scares and gore. The best horror films offer us cautionary tales, abject lessons in terror that we may not necessarily wish to hear, as horror themes typically take us to places that are both just quieting and uncomfortable. But then, isn't the truth often what we try hardest to repress? Thanks for joining me on this creepy journey to explore the ickier side of cinema. Stay curious, stay critical, and keep your eyes on the shadows. Until next time, stay spooky.